The Zirathi Shogunate had ruled the Orion sector for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 400 star systems. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their soldiers had never known defeat. When the human diplomatic vessel entered their space, the High Shogun laughed from his throne of polished bone and ancient metal. Ambassador Chun stood before the alien council with her hands clasped behind her back. She wore the formal white uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Her voice remained steady as she spoke through the translation device mounted on her collar. She offered peace. She offered trade. She offered friendship between two great civilizations. The Zirathi were tall creatures with scaled skin the color of dried blood. Their eyes glowed with bioluminescent gold. They watched the small human woman with expressions that mixed amusement with disgust. The High Shogun rose from his seat and walked down the steps toward her. He stood nearly 3 meters tall. His ceremonial armor was decorated with the skulls of species he had personally conquered. He looked down at Ambassador Chun and spoke words that the translator rendered in a cold, mechanical voice. He said that humans were weak. He said that humans were primitive. He said that the Shogunate did not negotiate with insects. He ordered his guards to seize the diplomatic party. What happened next became legend among the Zirathi. Ambassador Chun did not run. She did not beg. She simply pressed a button on her wrist communicator and said 5 words that would echo through galactic history. She said that diplomacy was now concluded. The guards reached for her. They never touched her. The personal shield generator hidden beneath her uniform activated and threw them backward across the throne room. Chun walked calmly toward the exit while chaos erupted around her. The Zirathi guards fired their plasma weapons. The shots bounced harmlessly off her shield. She reached a landing pad where her shuttle waited and departed without looking back. The High Shogun stood in his throne room surrounded by confused guards. He laughed again and declared that the humans would now face the full might of his empire. He ordered the 5th Fleet to pursue the diplomatic vessel and destroy it. He ordered the 7th Fleet to locate Earth and burn it to ash. He believed this matter would be settled within a single rotation. Admiral James Morrison received word of the diplomatic failure aboard the battleship Unconquered. He was an older man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. He had hoped that Ambassador Chun would succeed. He had hoped that humanity could avoid another conflict. But he had also prepared for this outcome. The Terran Imperial fleet waited at the edge of Zirathi space. It was not the largest force humanity had ever assembled. It did not need to be. What mattered was not the number of ships. What mattered was what those ships could do. The Zirathi 5th Fleet jumped into the sector where Chun's shuttle had been detected. They found something unexpected waiting for them. A single human vessel hung in space before them. It was small by Zirathi standards. It was painted black and carried no visible weapons. The fleet commander ordered it to surrender. The black ship did not respond to communications. It simply began to move. It moved faster than any vessel the Zirathi had ever encountered. It danced between their formation like a shadow made solid. Then it started killing. The Zirathi had energy shields. The human ship carried weapons that ignored shields entirely. It fired something that passed through defensive barriers as if they did not exist. Zirathi vessels began to die. Their power systems failed. Their life support collapsed. Their crews had seconds to realize what was happening before the cold vacuum claimed them. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The entire 5th Fleet was destroyed. Not a single human vessel was damaged because not a single Zirathi weapon ever hit it. The black ship was too fast. It was too advanced. It was something the Zirathi had never encountered in 12,000 years of warfare. News of the defeat reached the High Shogun. He refused to believe it. He called it lies and propaganda. He ordered more fleets to engage the enemy. He sent the 2nd Fleet and the 9th Fleet and the legendary 1st Fleet that had never lost a battle in 8,000 years. They all met the same fate. Admiral Morrison watched the battle reports with no satisfaction on his face. He took no pleasure in death. He simply did what needed to be done. He had given the order to engage. Now he gave another order. He told the fleet to advance. The Terran Imperial fleet moved through Zirathi space like a storm that could not be stopped. World after world fell before him, not through bombardment, not through genocide. The humans did not destroy civilian populations. They simply removed the ability of the Shogunate to make war. Orbital defense platforms were disabled with surgical precision. Military shipyards were reduced to floating debris. Communication networks were shut down by electronic warfare systems that the Zirathi could not understand or counter. Within weeks, the mighty Shogunate found itself blind and helpless. The High Shogun raged in his palace. He demanded solutions from his generals. They had none to offer. The humans were doing something impossible. They were fighting a war in a way that the Zirathi had never imagined. They were not trying to kill. They were trying to break the will to fight. It was working. Zirathi worlds began to surrender, not because they had been conquered, not because they had been threatened with extinction. They surrendered because they saw no point in continuing. The humans offered generous terms. They asked only that the Shogunate agree to peace and trade. They demanded no territory. They demanded no tribute. They simply demanded respect. The High Shogun refused to accept these terms. He retreated to his homeworld of Zirath Prime and gathered what remained of his fleets for a final stand. He declared that he would die before submitting to primitive mammals. He ordered his people to fight to the last soldier. His people had other ideas. The generals of the Shogunate had watched their forces be dismantled by an enemy they could not touch. They had seen humanity's restraint. They understood that the humans could have destroyed them completely, but had chosen not to. This was not the behavior of weak creatures. This was the behavior of a civilization that was strong enough to show mercy. They came to the High Shogun in his throne room. They did not come as servants. They came as soldiers who had made a decision. They told him that the war was over. They told him that further resistance would only bring more suffering to their people. They told him that he would accept the human terms or he would be removed from power. The High Shogun drew his blade. He was still the greatest warrior his species had ever produced. He killed 7 of them before they brought him down. His body was left on the steps of his throne as a message to those who would choose pride over wisdom. Ambassador Chun returned to Zirath Prime 3 months after her first visit. She walked through the same corridors where guards had tried to seize her. She stood before the same council that had rejected her words. But this time, she was not met with contempt. The new shogun was a younger Zirathi named Keth. He had risen to power because he understood what the old ways had failed to grasp. Strength was not just about weapons and fleets. Strength was also about knowing when to stop fighting. He bowed to Ambassador Chun with genuine respect. They signed the Treaty of Zirath in the same throne room where humanity had been called insects. The treaty established peace between the two civilizations. It opened trade routes that would benefit both species. It created a framework for cultural exchange and mutual assistance. It was everything that Chun had originally asked for. Admiral Morrison attended the signing ceremony in his dress uniform. He shook hands with the Zirathi commanders who had once tried to destroy him. There was no hatred in his eyes. There was only the weariness of a man who had seen too many wars and hoped that this would be the last one. A young Zirathi officer approached him after the ceremony. She asked him a question that had been burning in the minds of her people since the conflict began. She asked how humans had become so powerful. She said that humanity had only been a spacefaring civilization for a few centuries. The Shogunate had existed for 12,000 years. How had such young species defeated such an ancient empire? Morrison considered the question for a long moment. Then he smiled and gave an answer that the Zirathi would study for generations to come. He said that humans learn from their mistakes. He said that humans had fought wars among themselves for their entire history. He said that every generation had found new ways to destroy and new reasons to survive. He told her that humanity had almost wiped itself out more than once. They had built weapons that could end all life on their world. They had created plagues and poisons and horrors beyond description. They had done terrible things to each other in the name of nation and religion and greed. But they had also learned. Every war taught them something new. Every tragedy pushed them to grow stronger. Every failure made them more determined to succeed. By the time they reached the stars, they had thousands of years of hard lessons burned into their collective memory. They knew how to fight. More importantly, they knew why to fight and when to stop. The Shogunate had ruled for 12,000 years. In all that time, they had never faced a true challenge. They had grown complacent. They had assumed that their way was the only way. They had forgotten that empires fall and new powers rise. They had believed that strength came only from size and age. Humanity knew better. Humanity had risen from the ashes of their own destruction again and again. They had learned that true strength came from adaptation. True power came from growth. True victory came not from destroying enemies, but from turning them into friends. The young Zirathi officer listened to his words with wide golden eyes. She would go on to become one of the greatest advocates for human Zirathi cooperation. She would tell this story to her children, and they would tell it to theirs. The galaxy was vast and ancient. Many species had risen and fallen across its spiral arms. Many empires had declared themselves eternal, only to crumble into dust. But humanity was different. Humanity did not seek to conquer forever. They sought to connect. They sought to learn. They sought to build bridges that would last longer than any empire. The Shogunate had rejected human envoys because they saw only weakness. They did not understand that humanity's greatest strength was not in their warships or weapons. It was in their ability to extend a hand in friendship even after it had been slapped away. It was in their willingness to fight when necessary and forgive when possible. The Imperial fleet had rejected diplomacy not out of cruelty but out of necessity. They had shown the Shogunate that humanity could not be dismissed. Then they had shown something far more important. They had shown that humanity could be trusted to use their power wisely. In the centuries that followed the Treaty of Zirath, the two civilizations would become close allies. Zirathi warriors would fight alongside human soldiers against threats that neither could face alone. Human scientists would work with Zirathi scholars to unlock secrets of the universe. Together they would build something greater than either could have achieved apart. And it all began because one small human woman refused to be afraid when an empire tried to make her bow. It all began because one fleet commander understood that true victory was not about destruction. It all began because humanity had learned from 10,000 years of blood and fire that the greatest weapon was not a gun or a bomb. The greatest weapon was hope.